That's when it all took a turn. My buyer on that Friday, when she was supposed to sign loan docs, and ultimately we were supposed to close on the transaction, got the call from her employer that she had been furloughed. Hey guys, I wanted to make this video just to chat about a property that I've been discussing, a transaction I've been discussing on 60-second Sundays, every Sunday, the Jurupa Property. This buyer originally came to me off of a call from a previous listing I had in Jurupa Valley, and she wasn't quite ready to buy at that time, but was definitely interested. So I set her up with my lender, Benny, and over the course of the months after that, we were able to work towards getting her pre-approved. And then come early March, Benny made the call and she was fully pre-approved. So now that she was approved, we began the search. So we set her up on a search online, started to look at properties online, and then just a week later, this whole coronavirus pandemic started to hit. And a week later, the governor mandated the stay-at-home order. So because of this order, there was quite a few restrictions that were placed on the real estate industry, much as other industries as well. So my buyer expressed some interest in a property that we had sent her online, and what was supposed to be an open house on March 21st quickly changed after the government mandates and the expelling of all open houses at that point in time. So therefore, we moved to a socially distant showing on that Sunday. What that meant was my buyer went to the property. I was not there. The listing agent was not there. The seller vacated the home for the showing. My buyer got to see the home. We actually FaceTimed while she was looking at the home just so we could kind of cross-reference and chat about different features that she liked. So the next day we eventually submitted an offer on the property. In the meantime, the seller had actually put it on hold because of everything was going on. We submitted an offer subject to inspection, and the next day we actually were under contract. So we went under contract and we progressed as a normal transaction with modifications. The home inspection was one which the buyer was not there. I was not there, which I typically would be. The seller's agent was not there. The sellers vacated the home, and it was just the inspector in the home to see the property go through, and then everything that he found on the inspection we were able to discuss over the phone or via email. Fortunately, it was a newer construction home, so not a lot was wrong with the property. Now, the appraisal was another issue. Our contracted price was $436,000. The appraisal ended up coming back at $415,000. So that's $21,000 under the contracted price. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, when the appraisal comes in low, there's a couple different options that can happen. The buyer can come up with the difference because the lender is only going to loan up to the amount that the property appraises to. So the buyer can come up with the difference, meaning that they would have to come up with that $21,000 cash difference. Now, this buyer was a first-time home buyer, 3.5% down, so clearly she didn't have that money to make the difference. The seller didn't want to reduce down $21,000 because they thought the property was worth more. And we couldn't even meet in the middle because the buyer just simply couldn't bridge that gap financially, and ultimately the sellers didn't want to come down that much. We did what's called an appraisal rebuttal. The listing agent submitted a few comps which they felt should affect the value in an upwards direction. Got that back from the appraiser, no change of value. So I went to my title rep, Brandon at Chicago Title, and said, hey, this is a new construction area. They're still building new construction homes and they're still selling them. Some of those new construction transactions weren't reflected on the MLS. So those great comps from brand new homes that had sold at higher prices than what we were contracted at weren't reflected on the MLS, and ultimately that appraiser didn't do their job to look at other reflected closings in the neighborhood. So I got those from Brandon, got in touch with the new home builder, and they were able to provide some insight as well. Got those back to the appraiser, and a couple days later, we were actually able to get the purchase or the appraised price up to $430,000, which is a great jump, $15,000. We're only $6,000 off the contracted price. The seller agreed to come down to that $430,000 purchase price. So from there, we quickly progress towards loan docs and final closing. Now we had a few delays. A lot of people can attest to that in these times. A lot of people are working from home, and the influx in all of the refinances have put quite a burden on the lending industry. So with those delays, we had a couple days delayed there, but ultimately we were supposed to sign loan docs on the Friday and then ideally close that Friday. Well, that didn't quite happen, so we would push the loan doc signing till that weekend and then close on Monday. That's when it all took a turn. My buyer on that Friday, when she was supposed to sign loan docs and ultimately we were supposed to close on the transaction, got the call from her employer that she had been furloughed. This furlough for her would mean that she would work 1 week on, 1 week off. So essentially over the course of a month, her income would be cut in half. Obviously, she was quite conflicted about what to do, how to progress. Now, after sleeping on it, consulting with friends and family, she ultimately made the decision that she could not progress with this transaction given this financial burden from the furlough. Now, under a typical transaction, at this point in time, the buyer would have removed all of their contingencies, including the loan contingency. And if they were to cancel for any reason, the seller would be entitled to their good faith deposit. And in this transaction, that was $5,000. However, when this whole pandemic started, about the same time we almost went into contract on this property, the California Association of Realtors issued an addendum, a COVID addendum, which among other stipulations allowed for the buyer and the seller to agree to an extended close of an escrow, or ultimately if the buyer was affected from the coronavirus and COVID-19, they would have the ability to cancel the contract. Even after removing that final loan contingency, they would still be entitled to their good faith deposit if in fact they were affected by the coronavirus. Fortunately for my buyer, we included this in the contract. Now this addendum was just 2 days old when we submitted this offer, and because I had kept up on what was going on legislation-wise and along with the California Association of Realtors, I made sure to include that addendum in our contract. Seller agreed to it, and ultimately my buyer was able to retrieve her good faith deposit. I just feel so fortunate that I was able to include that addendum in our contract, because that made it so that even up until the last day, even when we were supposed to close, something happened to where she was affected by the coronavirus and she was able to ultimately back out of the contract and keep her good faith deposit. So a few lessons to be learned from this whole transaction. One, as your day and your life change in whatever industry you're in, the same thing's happening in real estate. We're still moving, homes are still selling, buyers are still looking. It's just being done in a much different way, such as I described about the home inspector, the appraisal, the socially distanced showings. Things are being done just in a different way. Two, if you're a buyer or seller in this market, you really have to kind of go with the punches. There's going to be delays. There's going to be hoops. There's going to be hurdles, ultimately throughout the transaction. And it can happen up into the very last day, as we learned in this transaction. We got through so many hurdles, so many hoops, and up until the very last day, something was ultimately out of my buyer's control, out of my control, out of the seller's control, which ultimately made it so that it wasn't a win-win situation for everybody involved. Three, when you as a buyer or seller are deciding on a realtor to represent you on a purchase or sale of your home, now more than ever, do you need to make sure you are hiring a professional. The days of just popping a property on the market and in 2 days you'll have 12 offers and you don't really need to worry about the contract because you have all the leverage on it are over. You need an agent who's on top of the contract, on top of all aspects of the transaction, because there will be delays, but you got to make sure that you're on top of those delays before they turn into something where it can't be fixed. Your agent needs to be a true practitioner in this market, on top of contracts, ever-changing climate, and legislations. Guys, thanks for listening today. I just wish you health, safety, comfort during these turbulent times. And if I can answer any additional questions, feel free to call or text message me. 909-334-2049, or I can be reached via email, thomasryan@kw.com. Thank you. Have a great day. Until next time, bye.